tell you more about the first part. Yeah, when I was praying about what I should present today, I have so much to say that it's really hard to know where to start. I guess I don't mean that, right? Okay. So I was praying about it last Sabbath because I've been so busy the last couple of months that I hadn't even had time to think about what I'm going to talk about. But God very clearly told me that I should tell my testimony today. Because I have 2 sermons that I get to, so tomorrow we'll talk about something about Thailand. But today I want to start with how we got to Thailand. And before I start, I'd like to read a Bible verse. You all know this one, but I'm going to read it again anyway. Romans 12, verses 1 and 2. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that ye present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. When I was reading that a little bit ago, I thought about this renewing of the mind part. And, we all want to be renewed in our minds, but that takes time sometimes. So I'm going to start. I didn't know exactly where to start, but in 1993, that's a long time ago now, it seems like, but I had 4 little boys, I don't know, up to 5 years old anyway, 5 or 6 I think they were, and I was a really busy mom. My husband was very successful. We had all that the world had to offer. We were not hurting in any way. I would say I was rich and increased with goods, and I had need of nothing. My dad's a minister, so I was raised in the church, always active in the church, but, and I thought I was a pretty good Christian. Just ask me, I'll tell you. Okay? So, but I had this friend, and she had kids too, and with little tiny ones, sometimes you just want to get away from them. At least that's where I was at that point. And so when I was talking to my friend, we'd kind of tease each other. It's like, I'm having a terrible day. She'd say, well, you want to go to Siberia? I'm like, sure, where's the next airplane? I'm ready to go. So one day, she called me up. She said, hey, Lisa, you want to go to Siberia? And I'm like, oh, so you're having a bad day too. She's like, no, I'm serious. You want to go to Siberia? I'm like, what? You mean you're not just having a bad day? She's like, no. They're trying to put these groups together to go to Russia to do mission work, And I'm thinking, mission work? Well, that'd be for me. I mean, that sounds like fun. I like adventure. And I could get away from the kids for a while. This would be great. And so we put in our applications, and we were both accepted, although she went at a different time to a different place, so I didn't get to go with her at all. But anyway, so I was slated to go to Brno, Russia, and it was really exciting. But the morning that I was supposed to leave for Russia, I woke up feeling a little weird. I'd had a really stressful weekend, getting ready to go. Once you get ready to go, it's kind of hard to leave your kids, especially when they're little babies. I mean, my youngest, Travis, was 9 months old. And so I woke up and I was just thinking, I'm hot. So I went into the bathroom and I got out the thermometer and stuck it in my arm, and it's like 104. I didn't feel sick, but I had a really bad backache. With, that's not that abnormal. But anyway, so I thought, you know what? I bet you Satan's trying to keep me from going to Russia because I have so much to offer these people. So I told my husband, woke him up and said, hey, I've got to go to the hospital because obviously I'm sick. But you get my stuff together and you go to the airport and start, getting things ready, and I'll just run to the hospital, get some medicine, and then I'm going to go. And so that's what we did. My mom took me to the hospital, and he went to the airport, and I told that doctor, you got 1 hour to get me out of this emergency room because I need to go to Russia this morning. And he did a little checking, and he found out that I had a really bad kidney infection. And so he gave me some medicine. He gave me some 7-Up. By the way, that is the wrong thing to give a person with a kidney infection. But anyway, he gave me some 7-Ups and just keep drinking, you'll be fine. Take the medicine, keep drinking. So I ran to the airport, got on the plane, and we started on our trip to Russia. And I was with a group of, it was just me and 2 men, and then there was another lady that was supposed to meet me there. But I had never met any of these 2 guys, either one of them. So I didn't even know these people. But somehow at the airport, they had gotten the message that I was sick, and I guess it must have been from my husband. Anyway, so they knew I was sick. They'd come to my seat once in a while and check on me. And we flying across the world, you know, and I got sicker and sicker and sicker, and it was just like, it was getting a little worrisome, and I thought, you know, I probably just need to sleep. I've never been able to sleep on an airplane. And so I thought, well, you know, when I get there, I'll get better. It's no big deal. So we got to Denmark, and those 2 guys that I didn't know, they rented me a room in the airport so that I could sleep for a few hours. And while I was in my little room, I started throwing up. And I thought, uh-oh, this isn't good, because he said to keep drinking. Now that I can't drink, I keep throwing it up, so I can't do that anymore. But I'm a real determined person, and I was certain that God needed me in Russia. So I got back on the plane, even though everybody, by this time, both of those guys, they were saying, you know, you're pretty sick. You should be in the hospital. You shouldn't be, like, going to Russia. They don't have good hospitals there. And I'm like, don't worry about it. Satan's just trying to stop me. I'm going to Russia. And so we got on the plane again. By this time, the stewardesses gave me 3 seats, and they laid me down back there, and then they gave me a tray, very nice tray, full of little throw-up bags. I was really, really sick. I couldn't sit up by that time. Anyway, then our plane had to stop in Sweden, and I remember it very clearly. I was laying on my 3 seats, and there was 5 stewardesses standing around the end of my seat, and the pastor that was in our group, he was standing in the seat right in front of me, and they're like, Lisa, you have got to get off this plane. You can't go to Russia like this. And I'm like, nope, I'm not getting off the plane. I am not getting off the plane. I'm going to Russia. Satan's trying to stop me. And right then, God spoke to me. It was a still small voice, but he kind of shouted to get my attention because I'm a little dense. But he said, if you don't get off this plane, you will die. And I sat up and I said, oh, I've got to get off the plane. And they're like, what happened to her? And so then I panicked because I'm a very shy person. And I'm thinking, I'm in a strange country all by myself, and I'm supposed to go to a hospital by myself. Well, one of the stewardesses turned to the pastor in our group, and she said, who are you? Aren't you a pastor? You better take her. And he's like, okay. So he did. Took me to the hospital. To make a long story short, my doctor there told me I had 2 hours to live. He said that the infection had gone into my bloodstream, that they had given me the wrong medication because I kind of put the pressure on the hospital there in Portland. And so I was in ICU for 1 week. And when I got out of the hospital, I rested for a few days at a local pastor's place there in Stockholm. And then the question came, what are you going to do? Are you going to go home? I mean, you're really sick. You need to go home. And I said, no, I'm going to Russia. But when I got to Russia, I mean, you can't go through an experience like that, having God tell you to get off an airplane and saving your life without looking at everything differently. And I noticed really fast that I had nothing to offer these people. I was a Sabbath school children's expert, but I didn't know God. I didn't really know who that voice was that spoke to me. And I realized, sorry, I can't tell this story without crying, but I realized that I needed God for the first time in my life. I met people there in Russia who had been tortured for their faith. I met new Christians who had never heard of God before. The Iron Curtain had just fallen. It was all new to them, and they were anxious to know God. And these people that really knew God were teaching them. And everything they asked me to do, I was too shy to do. I couldn't do anything, but I watched. And I said, you know what? I want what those people have. That has to be the most important thing in the world, to have what those people had. So, one of the questions that they asked me there in Russia was, how many rooms do you have in your house? Now, that's kind of a weird question, right? But in Russian culture, that's how rich you are. And the really rich people in Russia had like 3 rooms, okay? So they asked me this question everywhere I went, and you know what I had to say? 13. And that was embarrassing to me after a while. I'm thinking, here I am, supposed to be a Christian, and supposed to be a short-term missionary, and I have 13 rooms in my house. Somehow that just really struck me as horrible, when these people had nothing, but they had God. So when I went home, I told my husband, we've got to make changes, because we don't know God. And I don't know what possessed him to listen to me, because, you know, he was a very, very successful businessman. He was taking over a multi-million-dollar company. We had a huge house. It was out in the country. Nice, nice place. We had everything we ever wanted. And I'm asking him to leave it and go someplace where he has no job. He knows nobody. We have no house, nothing. But he said yes. He's a little bit crazy. And so we did. We sold everything. We sold all their toys. We sold everything. And we moved to what we thought was a very remote place in Idaho. We couldn't see any of the neighbors. They were on the other side of the hill. We had 20 acres, and by the time the government got through with us, we had enough money to survive for a year and build a shop. My husband thought the shop was the most important thing. He thought houses were kind of, you know, if you're going to give up one thing, it's not the shop, okay? It's give up the house. And so we built the shop, and then the government took the rest of our money. Anyway. And so we didn't have money for a house. And suddenly, I was living in a shop. I mean, I'm talking a machine shop, where there's welding and grinding and things like this going on in half of the building, and the other half with no walls is my house. All my furniture got ruined. All of my nice things got ruined, and I was left with junk, because you can't put I had a white sofa. We can't put a white sofa in a machine shop and expect it to stay white. I mean, it just doesn't work. Anyway, so we lived like that for 5 years. And during that time, my number one goal in life was to know who God was and to have a real personal relationship with him. At that time, it never even occurred to me to try to teach my kids about it. I was just trying to wrap my mind around it. And every time I would discover something, I would try to do it. Now, it's not always easy, because some of the things that he told me that I was shown, it's like if you look at the Bible and it says, whatsoever you do in word, you do all to the glory of God. Well, how many of you can watch a movie to the glory of God? Well, there's very few, right? So you can't really watch TV to the glory of God. Even the news isn't for the glory of God, right? I mean, and so I'm looking at this going, well, all of my friends have all these things, but the Bible says this, so I guess I better not do that. And then I'm thinking, well, I've got to dress for the glory of God. I have to raise my kids for the glory of God. I mean, how do you do that? I had never seen it put in action other than my little 2 weeks in Russia. And so I didn't know. I was kind of like wading my way through this and making tons of mistakes because I'd never really seen what I considered at that point to be a true Christian, other than what I had seen in Russia. And I didn't know how they raised their families or anything. But I'd read my Bible, and one of the things that really struck me is in the Old Testament somewhere. I'm sure you probably know where the verse is, but I don't. It talks about, writing God's law on your heart and on your posts and everywhere. So I thought, well, if parents are supposed to, talk about it as they walk by the way and they do all this stuff, then that means that I kind of have to be with my kids, right? And so we decided to homeschool them. And by that time, we were also looking for work again because, our savings only lasted a year because I wasn't good at not spending money. I was so spoiled that I honestly didn't know how to conserve money at all. I wasn't good at that. So my husband ended up learning to build log homes. And so we thought, well, if we're going to build log homes, then we kind of need to do it together so we can be teaching our kids and so we can be learning to like each other because we hadn't learned that before. And, so we started working together. And so I was homeschooling the kids and working with my husband building these log homes, and I'd put the kids, like on the floor, on the subfloor in the house, and give them their little books and tell them what to do, and then I'd be pounding away next to them, building houses with my husband. And my son Andrew, he's a contractor now, and somebody, I don't remember the story completely. He could tell you, but they said he's what was it? You were 23 years old and you had 17 years of experience in construction. It's because we did everything together. Every time I'd find something else that we could do together, we did it together. We learned gardening, we learned working. We got tired of building log homes after a while, so we started a bunch of businesses. I couldn't see how being in school for 12 years, 8 hours a day, was going to draw my kids closer to God. And so even when we were homeschooling, we did very little book work. In fact, Andrew kind of laughs about it because he went through 7th grade. Well, every other year. We didn't do every year even. But my number one concern was that they know God. That was all that mattered to me then. It's all that matters to me now. Because if they are ready for heaven, they've got everything. But if they're just ready for making money and being like everybody else, they have nothing. I don't care how prestigious their position is. But the neat thing about it is that God doesn't let them be nobodies. If you put God first, he gives you intellectual power. My oldest son is now a network engineer, and he's brilliant. Well, all of them are. They all have their different area of expertise. Andrew's a contractor, Jason's a missionary and a mechanic and a surgeon and a dentist and whatever he needs to be. He can do anything. And that isn't because of spending, 12 years in school. It's because we put God first. Travis has his own school. I guess he'd be like a director or something of his own school. Well, they didn't get that from spending their times in their books. They spend their time with God and with us and with their books when they had time. So, anyway, everything we should do should be for the glory of God. People ask me, how do you raise kids that all went as missionaries? They all did. Like I said, we examined every habit we had. And I can't say that I had it all right. I still don't have it all right. Now I have a grandbaby, and I see my son raising my grandbaby, and, you know, they are doing better than I did. They're thinking of things that I never thought of. And I think that's really cool. But the things that we really worked on, that God had to work on my heart, because it was difficult for me, were like TV and movies. We got rid of that. We didn't want that in our home. Worldly music. That one was tough for me, especially the Christian kind. You know, if it sounded like it wasn't for the glory of God, but was just somebody showing off, we got rid of it. We didn't want that in our home. We want things that only glorify God. Sometimes we'd come up with friends who would draw us away from God. You know, whether they're just fun and exciting, or, you know, it doesn't matter what it is. If they're drawing you away from God, it's not worth it. You can find other friends that need God, and then you can help them find them. We had to change our diet because what you eat affects your mind. We had to change our dress because how you dress affects your mind and how you can please God. We had to go through our books. We went through good, better, best. If it was a good book, we threw it away. If this book was better, we threw it away. If it was the very best book you could find, we kept it. Because we wanted everything in our home to reflect the glory of God. A lot of people tell me I was fanatical. I don't think so. Because look at where it's got us. I mean, and we're not there yet. I mean, it's helped us along the way, but we're not there yet. When I see all of my children in heaven, then I'll look for those people that said I was fanatical. Say, no, I wasn't. Because it's worth it. And not only will it be worth it when we all get to heaven, but you know what? My kids never rebelled. I'm trying my second family out right now, and I'm sure that they probably will, because I didn't get to raise them the whole time. But I watched my kids. I was like dreading their teenage years, and it never happened. They never got rebellious. They were just lots of fun, and we had so much fun together that I was thinking, well, why do all these people dread teenagers? They're wonderful. We went backpacking together, and we went kayaking together, and we went rock climbing together. We did everything together, and we had a blast, and my kids were just a joy to be around. They still are. Anyway, but after 11 years in Idaho, we did become a little bit comfortable. God had provided the money so that we could build our dream house, and it was nice. It was like a cedar chalet, and we had our own hot tub, and it was nice. We were very comfortable. But I read in the Spirit of Prophecy that if we want to know when it's time to sell, that we have to ask God to tell us. And so I prayed that prayer over and over and over. God, when it's time for us to sell, please tell me. And in 2004 or 5, somewhere around there, God told me it was time to sell. And I said, you know what, Lord, my husband just built me this dream house. You're going to have to tell him. And I honestly didn't think that would happen because I just didn't. He loved that house. But, God did tell him. And so he told me, we're going to move. And I was just thinking, wow, my kids have it made here. They got all these friends. We have this nice house. We have nice property. So it's really not fair to the kids to just say, hey, we're going to move. I decided to sit them down and ask them what they wanted. That's a dangerous thing to do, parents. But they said they wanted lots of snow. They hated it when it would snow and rain, and the snow and rain and snow and rain. That was the pits. They wanted lots and lots of snow. It's like, okay, I can handle snow. I like snow. They said it has to be way out. They didn't want people all over the place. It's like, okay, we can do that. They said no electricity. That's a little harder. I'm like, well, okay. Then they said no running water. I'm like, what? No running water? Okay. Then they said no phone. I said no. So we started looking, and God led us right to the perfect spot. It's in Montana, 5,000 feet of elevation, an average of 6 to 12 feet of snow a year. We had a 5-mile snowmobile ride in and out, and there was no running water, no electricity, and I could get cell phone service. I was so excited. So we moved there, and we built this little round house, and I didn't know it at the time, but God had a plan. The very first day that we got to Montana, we were camping in our utility trailer. It's kind of a weird thing, but we were camping in there, and I was having my morning worship. And God very clearly told me, just in my mind, he told me, this is not your home. This is your retreat. And I thought, why would God tell me that? That's kind of strange, isn't it? Have you ever had God tell you something like that? This isn't your home. This is your retreat. And I thought, well, that's odd. So I don't know if I told did I tell you kids that day? No. I think I waited a while because I was just a little puzzled by that. I thought, well, maybe we're not going to find any work here, because we didn't have any work when we moved to Montana. It wasn't like we moved there because there was jobs or anything. We never did things that way. We just moved because God had told us it was time to move. And anyway, starting back in 1993, I really, really wanted to be a missionary. And every single time I would pray about it, God would tell me, no, you need to raise your kids. And I didn't really like that, because I always thought of being a missionary as being kind of like, special or important or, adventurous or, something. I thought, wow, being a missionary, that's where it's at. But God always told me no, and I didn't understand it. It's like, well, don't you want me to work for you? What's wrong with God? Something is wrong, right? But there wasn't anything wrong with him. It was something wrong with me. Because I really thought I could do it still. I realized when I was in Russia I couldn't do it, but God had been teaching me for quite a few years by then, and I thought surely by this time I could do it. But he always told me no, and he always told me that I needed to take care of my kids. So that's what I tried to do. And then we spent 1 year up on the mountain. The first year, we didn't have time. We moved up there October 14th. At 5,000 feet of elevation in Montana, that means snow. So we moved to bare land, nothing on it. And so we had 2 weeks to put up a house. And so we did. We built a straw bale round house, and we used milk carton paper for the walls on the inside, so they were white. It looked very nice in there. We took a semi-tarp that we had made into a circle and put it on the top. We put in a nice door and some windows and a little tarp over the porch area, and that's where we lived that winter. We didn't need to work because, we just sold our house, and we made a ton of money off of it. We bought 60 acres up there in Montana. And so that winter, we had all our kids at home, and we just had fun. We went snowmobiling, we went sledding, we went skiing, and we noticed every 3 weeks this airplane would fly over the house and circle it and then fly off. And we'd always run outside and we're looking at this airplane like, what's he doing? The next summer we found out he was a local realtor, and he was checking to see if we were still alive up there. They didn't believe anybody could survive up there on the mountain. Anyway, so we spent 1 year together as a family up there. The next summer, we went to an open house, and John was there. And at that time, my oldest son was in kind of like a crisis, sort of, in his mind. He had done some amazing things, and he'd gotten the attention of some very smart people, and they were wanting to pay his way to go to a university to get his degree in engineering. But while we were at this open house, John was there, and I was just sitting around the campfire talking to my friend's brother, John, and he was saying they were going to go on this vision trip, and I was like, oh, what are you going to be doing? And he was talking about wanting to start a radio station in India. And I said, oh, that's interesting, because Ben's really interested in radio. You know, he's the engineer in the family here. And he's like, really, we need somebody like that to go with us. And so he talked to Ben a little bit, and Ben was like, who, me? You know, I'm not good enough to be a missionary. Or I mean, he's like, oh, it's just for 3 months, you know, and you can come back. And so Ben had a real dilemma on his mind, is go to the university and become an engineer, or go to India and help with a radio station. And so I didn't say anything to Ben about it. I just thought, you know what, he's got to work this out for himself. He was 19, and I figured he needs to make this decision on his own. And so he chose India, and he left. And I don't know how long it was. It wasn't very long when he called me and he said, Mom, I can't come back. He said, I've met these people that they've been in a war since World War II, and I'm meeting orphans that don't have parents, and man, Mom, these people really need help. And I was thinking, he's not coming back? Here we do everything together, and now he's not coming back? It was really hard on me. But I was really excited at the same time. Like, he's a missionary. Maybe that's why I wanted to be a missionary, so my son would want to be a missionary. I mean, this is so cool. And so, I mean, if you're going to lose your son, to lose it to missions is great, okay? That's the best way to go. And so I was fine with it, but I was really, really involved. I mean, every time he'd call, I'd like, listen, and then I'd tell everybody what was going on. And after 2 years, he finally came back to visit, just for a month. And one evening morning, we were sitting around, we had family worship in the morning, and then we were just sitting around talking, and Ben turned to Jason. He said, hey, Jason, you ever consider coming over with me? And Jason's like, yeah, I think I will. I'm like, you will? He's like, yeah, I think that'd be a good idea. And then Ben, of all the nerve, he turns to Andrew and he says, hey, Andrew, why don't you come too? And Andrew says, sure, I'd love to. I'm like, you would? Oh, no. Anyway, so in 2009, March 4, my birthday, they all left. And Jason went to Thailand, Andrew went to Cambodia, and it was just the three of us left, Travis and my husband and I, and we're like, really sad. I was like, what do we do now? I mean, half the family's gone. And so then John and Natalie said that, well, I could help them. I could be the communications director for Jesus for Asia. And I'm thinking, yes, that means I can talk to my kids. This is good. You know, so I was trying to, you know, keep in contact with them, make sure everything was good, and talking to some of the other missionaries. And then John told me, he said, well, you know, it'd be better if you went over there and actually visited the projects, then you would know what you were talking about better, because I still couldn't quite figure out how there was these, like, the huge cities, and yet everybody's living in bamboo huts. That didn't, I mean, that's kind of how I was thinking. It's like, huh, how's this? Didn't realize that the border areas of Thailand are completely different than the interior part of Thailand. Anyway, so in November of 2009, I think, somewhere in there, it was either 2008 or 9. I think it was 2009. Yeah, that's when we got to Cambodia. Anyway, we went on a 3-month mission trip. Travis did not want to go. He was totally against it. He had just finished building a powered hand glider, and he hadn't got to fly it yet, and he just wanted to stay home. But we wouldn't let him stay. I mean, we never did things that way. We always do things together as a family. And we were taking care of a troubled youth at that time, so that was our only income, was taking care of this troubled youth. So we took him with us. And we had so much fun. We started out in Cambodia. We went and we helped, my husband was a contractor by that time, so we helped do the studio floor for the television studio at Tim Maddox's school. And that was incredible. And then we went to Sunshine Orchard, and I was helping with a porch clinic. Since I was an EMT, Andrew and I are both EMTs. And, you know, that's not much. That's very little training. But we found out that in Thailand, that's a lot. I mean, we know way more than anybody else did. I mean, because these poor people, this one lady came in and told me that she didn't have any blood. That's the type of ignorance we're dealing with. Anyway, so I was working on the porch clinic, and the more I worked with the people, the more I fell in love with them. And I was just thinking, Lord, how can I go back to America? How can I do this? I mean, I knew Travis wanted to go back, and I had promised my husband before we went that I wouldn't force him to stay. And so, because he was the one who was kind of like holding his hands out. Missions, you know, I'm like, let's go. And he's like, you know. And so I was just thinking about it and thinking, oh, Lord, there's nothing for me in America. I mean, this is where I belong, but I also belong by my husband's side. And so I was just kind of resigned to going back. But one day we went up on a mountain. My oldest son came to visit us. He'd been in Burma, and he came out and he says, hey, Mom, Dad, I got to show you some things. So he took us up in the mountains. It's actually where Gail lives now. And he got us to the top of this mountain where there's this big pagoda up there. And he's like, just look around. Just look around at all the view. It's like all the way around. He says, there's at least 50 villages out there that have never heard of Jesus. And I just sat there going, how could anybody ask me to leave this? And I knew how I was feeling, but I didn't know how Travis was feeling, and I didn't know how my husband was feeling. But when we went back to the school where we were staying, one night we were all just sitting on my bed. That's kind of a normal thing in our family. Everybody sits on my bed in the evening. Everybody's sprawled out there. And my husband, he sat up and he said, you know what? This is what we're going to do. He said, I'm going to go back to America. I'm going to take Tremaine with me. And we're going to just wrap things up there. And we're coming back. I'm like, we are? Travis pipes up. He says, well, he says, I'm glad you decided that because I wasn't going back. I'm like, you weren't? It was a total surprise to me. I had no idea that they were thinking that way. None. Absolutely none. Anyway, so that's what happened. They left me and Travis there at the school. Oh, no, before we left, sorry, I got to get that part in. Before we left, when we decided to stay, we said, okay, so we can't stay at the school. There's too many people there. I mean, we had already been around Thailand and Cambodia enough to know that there's hardly any missionaries there. There's just almost nobody. So we decided to ask one of the pastors, where should we go? And he's like, oh, there's so many places. We'll just take you on a tour. So we went with this pastor, and we traveled, and we traveled, and we traveled. We went to different places that needed help, but we found a training center in southern Thailand that somebody over here had sponsored and built, but there was nobody there. It was just empty. And it had cell phone service. And so I was like, yes, this is where God wants us. It's very close to where Travis's school is now. Anyway, so while my husband went back to America, Travis and I and Jason moved down there to that training school. We didn't really have any idea of what we were supposed to do. We figured, well, the first thing to do is learn the language. That's reasonable, right? So we were kind of asking the people at the church, because there was a church in that town, and we're like, do you know anybody who can teach? And they found a teacher for us. But while my husband was back in America, he was gone for 5 months. He wrapped up our place in Montana, and I might just mention that, a little side note. Right before we left, a friend of ours gave us a house to build. She's a contractor, and so were we. And it totally paid off our third piece of property that we had bought. So, because we owned 2 pieces of property outright, and then we had a third that we were making payments on. So right before, like the week before we left for Thailand, we were debt-free. So he went back, finished things up there. Then he went and he started, I was amazed. He started traveling around, talking at different churches and stuff, just telling people what we were planning to do. Then he went and built a house for my parents, and then he came back. But while he was gone, one day it was Songkran, which is like a big national water fight. So fun. At least I thought so at the time. And with the neighbors had asked me to come over and have worship in their house. And so I was over there, and our caretaker that lived there on the property, he came in, and he had this little baby with him. And I thought, oh, cute. It must be his granddaughter. And so after the worship time, I just went over and sat down by him and was like, so who's the baby? Is this your granddaughter? And they're like, no, she's your new daughter. I'm like, what? They're like, well, you've got all boys. You need a girl. I'm like, huh? You got to be kidding. They're like, no, she needs a home. I'm like, she does? So that was my first baby, Hannah. She was 14 months old at that point. Her father was a soldier, a very violent, wicked man. He was on his 13th wife at that time, 12th or 13th, somewhere in there. He killed his first few wives, for sure. I'm not sure about what happened to the others. But his wife, for some strange reason, decided to leave him, and she abandoned the baby, knowing that if she had the baby, he would go off after her. So the caretaker had found this baby abandoned under this house. They don't know how long she was there, but it was at least 3 days, just with the pigs and the chickens and the garbage and the dirt. So when they handed her to me, you couldn't really, well, she just had a shirt on, and you couldn't tell what color it was. It was just filthy rags. It was awful. In fact, when they were handing her to me, I'm like, can you hang on to her for a few hours while I go to town? I didn't have hardly any money to work with, so I was able to buy 3 terrible little outfits. They fell apart. I had to sew them up almost every time she wore them, and some diapers and a bottle. And I went back and I took in this little screaming infant, washed her up, and then she was pretty cute. But within 2 more months, I was given a second child, and that was Mary Beth. We renamed her for an English name because she wanted one. She was 8 years old, and her mother had left her several years before that, and her father was, I don't know a way to put it delicately, but he liked to sleep around with the church ladies. He was the head deacon. And he wasn't a very good person. And yeah, he said that she was in his way. He couldn't raise her. And so he said by giving her to me, he was giving her to God. And you know, how can you say no when you see these children? And she was bald. He'd shaved her head. And it was so sad. It was so sad. I can't even describe it. I felt worse about having to take her. I mean, because I'm thinking, here her father is giving her away like she's nothing, you know. But anyway, he gave her to me. She was my second child. And then Jason was working at another children's home, and there was one little girl there that was kind of the ugly duckling of the group. She was older. She was 7. And so she wasn't as fun and cute as the little ones, you know. And so not very many people liked her. But Jason just, he's always looking out for the underdog. And so he was teaching, he was helping in the children's home, taking care of her. Well, she got really sick. And, but, not too sick, just a little sick. And one day, she was sitting in a hammock, and the lady that was running the children's home, she just walked by and she reached over and put her hand on her. And she said it was like touching fire. She had a fever that was so high. And so she yelled, she grabbed her, and she ran into the bathroom, and she started dumping water in a tub, and she dunked her in the tub, and she stopped breathing. And she didn't know what to do, but she yelled, and Jason was there. And Jason knew what to do, because when Andrew and I were going through EMT school, we practiced on Jason and Travis. And so he knew exactly what to do to get her breathing, and he kept her breathing until they got her to the hospital. She had scrub typhus, and when he was the only person that she would respond to or cooperate with. And so he stayed with her in the hospital, taking care of her and taking turns with the other volunteers and stuff, but he was the only one she would cooperate for. And so when she got out of the hospital, he had to teach her how to walk and talk again, and he used to give her therapy in the creek. He'd take her down there and make her swim, and make her do her schoolwork, because the doctors had said she was brain damaged from the high fever. But there's nothing wrong with that child. After a while, he said, she needs more specialized. She needs a family. And so he brought her to me. And Esther is now 14. And there's nothing wrong with her. She's a smart girl. But she was my third child. Somewhere in there, I got number 4 and 5. They were older. I think they were teenagers already. They don't know exactly how old they were, because they found out later that they weren't actually how old they thought they were, so I'm not sure what to tell you there. But anyways, Sunda and Allie, and they had lost their father to a car accident when they were little. I think Sunda was 9 years old. She's the older one. And then their mother remarried a drunk that was very abusive, and so they ended up on the streets. And they raised themselves until they came to me. And I think Sunda might have been 15 or 16, somewhere in there when they came. So I had those two. And then a year or so later, I was given another baby. And she was only 6 days old. So she's doing better as far as emotionally than the others. But her father had abandoned them. He wasn't a good provider, so she was underweight. And when she was born, and the mother had hepatitis really bad, and she just didn't want her. And so the neighbors came to me and said, "Hey, we have a baby for you." And I was sick at the time, and I'm like, "Oh, come on, I've already got a troublesome 2-year-old. I don't know that I can handle another baby." But they're like, no, you got to come. And so I went over there, and I'm pleading with the mother, "If I give you food, if I give you money, will you take care of your baby?" And she says, "No, I won't. I won't even take care of her tonight." And so what do? You have to take the baby. Anyway, so that's how Destiny Grace came to be a part of our family. She's going to turn 6 this week. Anyway, oh no, I think I'm going to save that for tomorrow. When I look back on the whole experience, I realized that in 1993, God started to answer my prayer. I said I wanted to be a missionary, but God knew I wasn't ready. In 1993, I was spoiled. I thought I knew it all, and I thought I was a pretty good Christian. By the time I got to Thailand, I wasn't spoiled anymore. Can't be spoiled and live like that in Montana. I didn't think I could do it, and I knew I wasn't a good Christian. And I thought that disqualified me for being a missionary. But God says, when we know we're nothing, then He can work with us. And through the last 8 years, I found out that I'm worse than nothing. I don't do anything right unless I'm totally and completely surrendered to God every moment of every day. That's the only way we can do anything good in this world, is to give everything we are to God, no matter what it is. It may seem fanatical to other people. It may seem extreme or like it's not really necessary. But God doesn't look at things the way we do. He looks at things totally different. And his plan for our lives is so much higher than what ours is. We can have no clue as to what he has in mind. You know, you can think, well, you know, you have to earn money. You have to have a good job. You have to have a good education. Do you? Do you really? Who's telling you that? When we went to Thailand, we didn't plan on staying. So we had zero money. When my husband took Tremaine back with him to America, he talked to his mother. He was our only income from taking care of Tremaine. He said, we can take him over there with us and, you know, take care of him there. And she said, you know, that's just too far. I'll have to find a different facility. And so all of our income quit. Zero, right there. I was already in Thailand, so it's already too late, you know. We already started this. But we had zero savings, zero income, zero debt. Zero problem for God. You know, we have never once lacked any good thing. Even the months where we had no money. There was a few, well, not no money. I've never had a month there was no money, but there was a month when I had 35 students and $250 came in. But I can tell you right now, that was the month we ate the best we ever had. Because all I did is I went to the students and I said, you know what? We didn't get much money this month, so I don't think I'm going to be able to buy food. And they're like, oh, no problem. So they started going out into the jungle and collecting food, bringing it back. They went to the village, and the village is mostly older people, or where we were then. And they had all these coconut trees and mango trees, and I mean, there are tons of fruit trees in the village, and they weren't using it. The fruit was just falling on the ground. They're saying, hey, pick that up. We had fruit salad every day. We had the best, but oh, they have these ferns that grow right next to the river that tasted so good. It was the best food we'd had. But God never, ever has let us suffer in any way as far as want. Never. But tomorrow, I'll tell you the rest of the story.